Hello and welcome to another episode of the Grind one-on-one series. Yet again, we failed the title of the series, and I have two people on. First, we have Hunts, the manager of Triumph Gaming, and ioStux, head coach and creator of his new team, ioStux Academy. Today, we'll be talking mostly about ioStux's new team. So, firstly, let's go over what ioStux Academy is and what their goals are.
So the Twitter post kind of went over most of it already. It's very similar to other teams like Triumph and Skyfoxes did before, where I'm trying to, at its heart, because that's the question that people have been asking, at its heart, it is a tier 3 team, but it differs from other tier 3 teams in that I'm not looking to follow the same kind of standards that most tier 3 teams follow by. So I'm not looking to, just have a random group of 6, friends that I bring together and then killing time until next open division or anything like that. Because to be honest, once you work at an academy level, it becomes very difficult to actually get back to the standards that exist in most tier 3 teams. So I just want to essentially have a tier 3 team, but that is being run what I think is adequate standards. My goal with this project is to give players, especially tier 3 players, although again I'm not really looking to just kind of generalize players into one category because I think that's very inaccurate, is to give them an opportunity to answer the question of, do I have what it takes, and do I actually want to be a professional player? Because the jump in terms of commitment and intensity, from what most tier 3 teams have right now, and again I'm not saying every tier 3 team, right, but what most tier 3 teams have, and then jumping into an academy team, the reality is that a lot of those players just aren't ready for it. And I would rather have them find out whether they are ready for it now, rather than getting picked up by an academy team and then getting dropped after 3 weeks, because I don't think that's in their best interest. So I'm trying to give them an environment where they're going to be held to the same standards, where they have a schedule that is very comparable to what most academy teams run, where they have the coaching staff and the support that they get from most academy teams, and just for them to say to see, is this really what I want? Because I feel like a lot of players in tier 3 still have a very kind of rose tinted perspective of what being a pro player and what earning money playing video games actually is. And I want to show them that it's not, like, it can be fun, of course, and it's if you enjoy your work, then it's going to be fun. But I believe that working in esports and making a living in esports is not about fun mainly, it's about fulfillment. Like feeling like you're putting in time, you're putting in effort, and then being fulfilled because you achieve the results that you want.
I guess that leads us to our next question, which is, how does your project differ from the other tier 3 organizations?
So the main difference, and I think a screenshot of it also got posted, is that we have a special charter that essentially outlines the standards that we have of our players. Again, that idea isn't new. Most of the stuff in our charter is stuff that's essentially in academy team contracts, but obviously I cannot, I don't have the means to pay players and send them a contract or anything. So this is essentially a replacement. And I've actually seen some tier 3 teams start doing it as well. And it outlines, what we expect of the players. In terms of behavior, trying to minimize them, just raging, getting loud, being unconstructive, flaming their teammates. Punctuality is very important. One of the things of the charter is that I expect my players to be in voice 5 minutes before any appointment that we schedule, just to make sure that no issues arise. Because you've probably heard, but the term NA scrims has existed for years now, and it exists for a reason, because when you're looking at scrims in tier 3, I could bet money on you that whatever next scrim I'm going to look at is probably going to be 10-20 minutes late, right? And I feel like and something like that would be unacceptable at an academy, at an hour level. So that is what I consider the absolute minimum, being on time on scrims, because you get the most out of your time that way, right? um and the charter is just full of these very, very basic rules that are super simple to follow, and that is what I would say is the main difference. The second difference being our schedule. Again, tier 3 teams differ there. Some tier 3 teams do have a proper schedule where they do 2 scrims a day. But what we're aiming for with our schedule is, we want to go for 2 blocks a day, And then we want to shoot for 3 blocks a day on weekends, actually, with 1 block replacing the regular review that we would have. And the reason for that is because a lot of players in tier 3 simply aren't ready for tournament days. And especially once you go to a LAN event, they can be incredibly taxing. And being able to, scrim 4 hours a day is very, very different from then adding 1 extra block on top of it. So I'm hoping to, for one, build some extra stamina in the players, and to again show them, like, okay, you can play video games for 4 hours a day, but once you're in the Overwatch League, 4 hours a day is the absolute minimum. So can you handle more, right? A lot of teams in Europe, especially, have already made 3 blocks a day their standard. I don't want to go that far to just have 3 blocks a day every single day, because I think that a slower transition is more beneficial for the players in the long run. But I do think that every player in tier 3 does need to have experience with scrimming 3 blocks a day, at least once or twice a week.
Yeah, I think that's a really good stat that players should have, especially coming into the tier 3 scene. Like building up to Overwatch League level, you got to have those standards, and you have to know what is expected of you. Speaking of what is expected of you, I have Hunts on, and he is on Triumph Gaming, an organization that is very similar in standards to yours. At least I could say that. And so, Hunts, do you have a question for ioStux?
I do. So in your opinion, why do you think ioStux has like gotten this so many negative feelings from people in the Overwatch community? Why do you think that? Or at least in your opinion?
Well, to be honest, and this might surprise some people, I didn't actually read any of the comments until very recently. When I made that tweet, it was like I was pretty much just starting out with the project, so I was very busy just getting everything going. I was in the middle of taking care of staff, and I didn't really care too much about the notifications, so I didn't actually check them until much later. I did get some DMs, obviously, of players being interested, staff, commending me because they thought that it was needed. But I didn't check the comments until like much later of the Twitter post. I mean, yeah, there are some negative takes, but I do consider them the vocal minority in this case, because what a lot of people don't see is the kind of private messages that I've gotten. And if you look at the tweet itself, I think it's at like 600 likes or something. I don't think people would like it if they didn't, actually like it. What I've seen is that the main reason people dislike it is because they feel like I was, essentially calling volunteer work out, like saying, oh, these tier 3 teams are doing it for free. So, like this is, way too harsh, right? And to that, I say that, well, of course it's harsh, right? One of the things that I was taught when I was very young is that you always want to dress for the job that you want to have, not the one that you have right now. And I think it's the same case here. So I'm not saying that, people who are busy with school or who are busy with work need to go out and spend, 8 hours a day just practicing Overwatch, right? But what I am saying that in the end, players and staff are competing with people that are on academy teams, and if they're putting in a lot more time than you do and they have much higher quality practice, then it's going to be impossible for you to eventually catch up, right? So yes, there have been a lot of negative takes. I mean, that's fine, but I don't expect people to just change the way that they run teams over time, right? We have teams like Triumph, we have teams like Sky Foxes that are starting, to make that transition, and now the project that I have. And I don't expect a lot of people to follow suit. But I do think that, especially with the results that you guys have gotten recently, obviously I'm trying to mimic those results as best as I can. I'm hoping that people realize that there is a point behind it, and of course it is extra effort, and of course not everyone is going to have time to really put in that effort. But those who do, and those who decide to take that step, are going to be rewarded. So yeah, to summarize the opinion, I just think that a lot of people thought that, I was criticizing their work even though it's volunteer work. But in my opinion, in esports, you can't have the mindset of, oh, I'm not getting paid to do it, so why should I do it correctly? Because it's the other way around. If you want to get paid for it, you have to prove that you can do it correctly. And that's, what I hope to see from tier 3 teams, moving forward, that they can do it correctly.
So you actually talked about having written up the tweet a while ago, that kind of leads me to my next question, which was, how long has this Academy project been going on for, or have been around for, and how has it been going at the early stages?
So initially, when I parted ways with Uprising Academy, I was just about to head out for my flight back home, and Scott messaged me from Goats, and he asked me, "Hey, do you want to create an open division project together?" And at first, I just told him, like, wait, I'm about to go take my flight. I want to relax with family a little, which I did. A week later, he messaged me again, and I said, yeah, sure. We went into a call. We kind of talked about some details, and then we decided to go and create a project together. Without going too much into detail, we found some players, we found some staff, we found a manager, but then eventually, and again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here because it's not really anyone's business, but eventually I decided to split off from Scott and said, okay, I'm just going to make my own project. And then I made my own project. I started, getting staff. I started getting players, getting manager, all of that stuff. I can't tell you how long it's been around for exactly, because it was kind of a very smooth transition between Scott's project and then when we parted ways and we both made our own separate projects. I would say before the tweet, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. I mainly wanted to wait with the announcement because I don't like what I need people to understand, and I'm going to clarify this here as well. There's not going to be community Discord or even a Twitter, like a separate Twitter account for the project, because I don't consider this like a team at heart, like a pure team, like a brand that I'm trying to develop. It's not about telling the public what we're doing and what we're about, because in the end that doesn't really matter. So my main focus with the project was just getting it to run, getting a solid staff going, which we've luckily have managed to finalize now. Pretty much the only reason that I made that tweet initially was because I saw that people were starting to talk about the project, because that was when we started like scrimming other teams for tryouts, when we transitioned from in-house tryouts to scrimming other teams. And then I thought, okay, everyone knows at this point, I might as well just do a quick announcement. But I don't really have any intentions of, going too in depth about it, because that's not what this project is about. And to clarify again, the only reason that I am on this podcast is because, it's the grind, and I have a little bit of a history with the podcast. So, but other than that, like, a lot of people have asked me kind of questions, and usually I just don't. It's just not a priority to me right now. What other people think or what kind of questions they have.
It makes sense. And I know you have another question, Hunts, but we were talking about the grind, and the last time we had you on was it over a year ago? It must have been close to a year ago.
Yeah, it was when Promise, Lucky Mojo, and I pretty much like created the idea,
Mm-hmm.
and then we started transitioning it because we didn't have the time anymore.
How have you been since then? Because you were in XL too.
Oh yeah, no, that's a long story. Good actually. So I obviously joined Toronto Esports, and then we eventually changed our name to Uprising Academy. I think that was a very important experience, because it, for one, allowed me to work directly one-on-one with Huck. And Huck seems to, again, kind of have a weird reputation in the public. But when you work with him, you start to realize that like he does know what he's talking about, right? And I learned a lot of things from Huck. The kind of core philosophies that he has, how he prioritizes, public perceptions versus just doing his job essentially. And it was also the first time that I got to experience work in a team house, and that's when I realized, because this is kind of an interesting story actually. When I was never in a team house, I always dreamed of being in a team house and how big of an advantage it would be. You can probably find old tweets where I was talking about how big of an advantage it is that academy teams have team houses. But some players, like from the Houston Outlaws, I think, don't quote me on that, some Owl Teams players, they were actually commenting how like a team house kind of sucks, and they would prefer just having individual apartments. And when I was in Uprising Academy, that's when I kind of started to realize that a team house is nice, but it also brings with it a lot of issues. And in retrospect, having individual apartments is actually better. But that is besides the point. The important thing with Uprising Academy is that I used to have this mindset that academy teams are just have a natural advantage, right? I mean, they have to, right? They get a team house, they get paid a salary, and those things are good. But I feel like after Uprising Academy, I realized that those things aren't as important as I thought they were. Like, a team house doesn't actually give you any huge advantages, really, that make your practice more efficient or anything. You can't do anything in a team house that you wouldn't be able to do just over a Discord call. And regarding the salary, a salary is nice, of course, but the main advantage of a salary is that it allows you to pursue Overwatch full time. And the reality is that a lot of players in Tier 3, they can pursue Overwatch full time without a salary. Most of them are in school, or they have part-time jobs. So, they can invest 6-hour days into Overwatch. And that's when I realized that, like, academy teams, obviously it's good to be on an academy team, but it's not like they have any inherent advantages. It's not like being on an academy team automatically is going to make you better because you have a team house or because you have a salary. And if getting a salary makes you play better, then I personally think that says more about you than the fact that academy teams have an inherent advantage, right? And that's what motivated me, because I realized that most Tier 3 teams have kind of given up, and they've just fallen into this mindset of bringing together the best players and then winning open division and then getting into contenders and winning, and then nepotism and clout and all of that stuff. And they had this mindset of fighting an uphill battle, essentially. But I kind of realized that's not really true. They're kind of just handicapping, themselves, right? And after realizing that, it's not an uphill battle. Like, all of the advantages that academy teams have are more conveniences than actual advantages. That's what motivated me to create the project.
Hunts, what do you think about team houses?
I think team houses are, I think they're really interesting. You get to be in an environment where you're surrounded by your team, you're surrounded by your coaches. I think it's something I've always wanted to be a part of, but of course we don't Trav doesn't have one. But it's something that's definitely very interesting. You get to actually talk to your teammates, to the coaches. You get to have that one-on-one experience. They basically never had. Like, let's say you're playing sport like soccer. You're there with the coach, but when you're playing like esports, like from your house with people from different parts of the world, it's a completely different experience. You have we have Fragon, who's in Israel. We have Decot, who's living in Norway. We have Sam, who lives in the U.S. Just if you had those, had the let's say we had Triumph together, it would be a very interesting experience for everyone, because something I like to guess a once in a lifetime experience, because unless you make it to Al, it's something you'll never get back, unless of course you make it to Academy or Overwatch League.
Yeah, sorry to spring that question on you first. I just wanted to know your opinion, because Triumph hasn't had a team house, and it remains to be seen whether or not there will be one. But it's interesting that players from around the world like that can come together. But I think it'd be super interesting for them to actually live in a team house together.
So this is just generally about ioStux Academy. I was curious, and other people were curious. How will you deal with the professionalism and the maturity on your team? There were some rules that were, I guess, leaked, where it's like you can't do this. Well, you can't death slam. You can't your teammates. All that stuff. So how are you control the high level of team and professionalism on your team?
First of all, following those rules, it's more of a guideline, really, is in the player's best interest, because if players are really honest with them, like if we take the rule about no desk slamming, for example, right? No one can argue that rule. Even Tier 3 players can, like what are they going to do? Are they going to come to me and tell me, oh, this rule is stupid, I really want to slam my desk? It doesn't make any sense, right? And it's the same thing with the other rules. Like, no one is going to come to me and complain, yo, this rule about being 5 minutes early, like, that's unacceptable. Like, why should I be there on time? Like, what is this, right? So if the players really think about it, they're going to realize that all of those rules are the bare minimum. And if they can't do that, then my job is done. Then I've proven to them that they aren't ready for, they aren't ready to get paid yet. They aren't ready for Academy morale, right? The way that we're going to handle that is, first of all, before we invite a player into the project, we're always completely transparent with their schedule, and we're always completely transparent with the charter, with the kind of standards that we try to uphold, right? So no one is forced to commit to the team or even trial for the team without knowing, hey, like, this is the schedule on like the precise times we'll need you here. Can you make that? And if they say no, then that's unfortunate. But again, usually if they have the time, they say yes, and then we show them the charter. And again, no one is going to, no one so far has told us that, oh, these rules are insane. Like, what is this? A military camp? Because again, in the end, all of those rules are extremely reasonable. Again, they're the bare minimum. And if they agree to follow those rules, and if they agree to being able to commit to that schedule, only then do they actually join the project. And then after they join the project, there's two things that can happen, right? Either they are unable to follow, the standards, or they are unwilling, right? If they are unwilling, they can just say, okay, I've tried it. This isn't for me. I'm going to leave. No hard feelings. And that's it, right? Because again, I do expect players, once they have their first day, scrimming 3 blocks instead of 2, and how exhausting that can actually be. Of course, some players are going to say, oh, okay, maybe this is too much for me, right? On the other hand, if they just, don't follow the rules, essentially. So if a player is consistently late, if he's not taking notes properly, if he just gets tilted or angry, and again, to clarify that obviously it is our responsibility to try and help them overcome those issues. But if we feel like spending resources on them is a waste of our time, then we're going to start looking for replacements, because there's always players that do want the absolute best and that do want to hold themselves to a higher standard. So if someone comes in and realizes it's just not for them, then that's completely fine. They're off the team. We can look for someone else. So how do I plan to enforce these rules? The same way that academy teams or all teams enforce these rules, except that I don't have a contract. It's not like they're breaking a contract by sending racist tweets or anything, but they're doing the team and they're doing their teammates a disservice by acting that way. And in that case, I'm not going to hesitate, just again finding more suitable options moving forward.
The more that you talk about it, the more it seems kind of obvious that, like, you're just an organization that is starting out, that is just holding themselves to a higher standard than tier 3 organizations that might be created by just a group of friends or people that just want to play Overwatch for fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think even saying tier 3 organizations for a lot of those teams goes pretty far, because an organization implies that they have proper staff, a proper hierarchy, proper structure. But if you look at it, most teams are just player run, essentially, right? One example is Last Minute. They used to be called If They Go Golds, I Go Hammond. I think they have a staff now, but for a long time of the team's existence, they were essentially player run. Like their head coach was their main tank, right? And at that point, that's not an organization. That's just a free for all, right? So I'm not even saying that organizations in tier 3 are badly run. I'm saying that a lot of teams don't even attempt to run their teams like an organization. It's really, I think calling them teams isn't even that accurate. I think most of them are more comparable to pug teams that come together for a tournament and then disband, immediately after.
Do you think that the basic picture or this vision that you've created, do you think it's gotten too big too fast, or do you think that it's going to be small, it's going to become bigger as time goes on?
I don't think it's big or small. I think it's exactly how I want it to be, essentially. Of course, I could go make it bigger, have a proper team with social media coordinators and multiple managers and all of that. But for what this project is, for its goal, that would just kind of exceed the scope. So, I think the project is, and its goals are the size that it needs to be. And again, if any player thinks that the standards that we've set or the goals that we've set are too big and too lofty, then again, I think that says more about them and the expectations that they've set for themselves rather than us.
I think I heard a little bit that you weren't making this your full project. You were still looking for offers from either other Academy teams or Overwatch League teams. We can go over that as well. But I also wanted to know, as a fan of your content, are you planning on continuing your YouTube?
No. Right now, I don't really have any intentions. Obviously, again, I'm fine with doing podcasts like this, but there used to be a time where I was kind of juggling multiple things. I was juggling my private coaching. I was juggling, my professional career. I was juggling my YouTube channel and my content. And my mindset, and this is the mindset that I recommend to everyone in this voice call and to everyone that's listening and to everyone in any scene. If you do something, do it right. Do it properly. Put all your effort into it. So I don't want to spend half my time in a project and my professional career and then the other half of the time into content creation. I've made that decision. Content creation is behind me. For now, I'm just focused on esports.
What should we expect to see next from ioStux Academy?
Of course, we're going to join Open Division. That's kind of a given. If there's any tournaments before that, we might join them. But again, and I mentioned this in the initial tweet as well, those are nice, of course, but not really our priority, especially with next Open Division being a very long time away. Contenders only has 2 seasons a year now, which means that after this contender season, there's going to be a break for the Gauntlet and the World Cup. So it's still, the next Open Division is still, quite a ways off. And I think I still have to prove that this project can work and really grow it until that happens. So it's too early to say what will happen by the time Open Division rolls out.
All right, well, thank you guys for coming on and answering a bunch of questions. ioStux, thank you so much for enlightening us with some of the context to the Twitter post that you put out. It's just nice to get some context and clarity, because I think a lot of the at least some of the Tier 3 staff seemed a little miffed over just how it was exactly, and I think that this episode will clear things up significantly. Basically saying, it's kind of obvious what you're doing, and holding yourself and this team to a higher standard is probably better for the community as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the whole goal of the project is not to have too much public attention or anything. So of course, I could have gone out and I could have started talking to people and explained stuff. But the mantra of this project is look at me do, don't listen to me say. And, I'm just going to focus on my work because what they think of the project doesn't immediately affect what I'm doing. And I do strongly believe that, once we get this going, once the first players have had their experience, and at the time of the recording this, some first players have already made their experiences with it. Like, for example, Rhino recently, who made a tweet. It's just a matter of time until they start to better understand what it actually is. But yeah, I think it's something that will solve itself over time. It's not really a huge priority, and it's up to them to see if they want to have a different perspective.